The great hero engages in a final showdown with the demon lord, prompted by the Dark Monarch's dire warning of impending world destruction. As the Demon King summons a massive meteor, the hero quietly prepares by picking up a tiny rock from the floor. With a surge of power infused into his humble stone, the hero strikes his sword, colliding with the meteor and obliterating it. Frustrated with the cheap tactics, the hero seeks to settle things once and for all. Both sides unleash their full power, resulting in a high-level clash that causes the environment to be destroyed. After a prolonged battle that leaves both combatants drained, they stumble toward each other and deliver their final attacks. As life fades from the hero, he smiles, knowing that the world is safe thanks to his sacrifice. Time passes, and the students of prestigious Rosewood Academy warmly greet one another. It is Blade's first day after being transferred, and he is impressed by the friendly nature of his fellow students. He realizes this is how normal people interact and eagerly anticipates making new friends and living an ordinary life. He navigates the hallways, greeting everyone he meets, but they look at him with curiosity as an unfamiliar face. Some find his behavior amusing until he approaches a group of students to make friends. Blade introduces himself, and they reciprocate, leading to his excitement over quickly making 4 friends. He believes he can make up to 100 friends if he continues at this pace. Their joyful encounter is interrupted by a student named Ernest, who scolds them for being rowdy in the hallways. One of the students explains to Blade that she is called Empress because she is the top student in the school. Undeterred by her unfamiliarity, Blade confidently introduces himself to her. However, she responds with a hint of attitude due to his status as a newcomer. The other students timidly explain that Blade recently transferred into the school, but Empress remains skeptical as she believes the school would not allow such a late admission. She emphasizes the school's prestige, reserved for aspiring heroes dedicated to protecting the world. Blade dismisses the idea of being a hero, clarifying that he is solely there to make friends. This triggers Empress, who challenges him on his lack of wholehearted commitment. Blade diffuses the tension by diverting the conversation to his need to find the headmaster's office. To her surprise, she sees King Gilgamesh sitting in the principal's chair. She immediately displays respect for the king, puzzled by his presence. Blade walks confidently toward the king, acknowledging that he made it. Ernest attempts to hold him down as a subtle gesture of respect, but Blade continues, causing Ernest to apologize for her rudeness. The king chuckles, revealing that the previous headmaster had already informed him about her and commending her excellent record. While she humbly accepts the praise, she notices that the king referred to the previous headmaster. The king then discloses that he will be the new headmaster from that point forward. This revelation shocks Empress, but she had heard about the king's accomplishments as a warrior. She expresses her excitement about learning under his guidance. Interrupting her sucking up behavior, the king asks Empress to excuse herself as he needs to speak with Blade privately. She gives Blade a salty look before leaving. Blade takes the opportunity to complain to the king about his encounter with Ernest, worried that he has made a bad impression on her. The king, seemingly at ease with Blade, asks him about his presence at the school. Gilgamesh confesses that he wants Blade to regain his powers as a hero. However, Blade has different plans for himself and expresses his desire to lead an ordinary life. The king acknowledges his wishes, but emphasizes that the extraordinary nature of the students in the school will aid in his rehabilitation. Gilgamesh also reveals his plan to overhaul the curriculum, as he believes his predecessor was too lenient. Blade disagrees, arguing that with the Demon King defeated, there is no need for such changes. The king informs Blade that he received reports of the epic battle between the Grey Hero and the Demon King, resulting in the mutual annihilation of their powers. However, he still holds hope that the Grey Hero's powers will be resurrected, as Blade is that very hero. Blade looks at the old man incredulously, questioning his sanity. Following their meeting, Blade heads to the advanced class. Ernest is shocked to see him there, and Blade explains that he took the exam for the lower classes but was instructed to come to this one. To prove his claim, he shows her his emblem. However, Ernest accuses him of bribery and backdoor access. The other students in the class pause their preparations to observe the exchange. Ernest asserts that Blade's nonchalant behavior makes him unworthy of being in the academy. Blade disagrees, asserting his dedication to making 100 friends. He proceeds to introduce himself to his new classmates and playfully pats Ernest on the head, causing her to blush. She attempts to attack him, but he easily dodges her. The force of her slash narrowly misses their tutor, who looks on in horror, realizing what could have happened. Sophie, the tutor, instructs the class to gather while informing Blade and Ernest that they will be tested on their abilities, despite it not being part of the lesson plan. The other students watch as Ernest explains the test. Blade notices that the armor before him is enchanted, and Ernest reveals that every student in the advanced class can slice through it. His task is to prove himself to everyone by slicing through the armor. Failure would mean admitting to his illicit entry and leaving the academy. Ernest emphasizes that the advanced class is on a whole different level. Blade questions what level that is, and Ernest exaggerates, claiming they are 3 levels above. Based on this, Blade decides that his second sword should be enough. Releasing his aura, he astounds the students by revealing that his fighting spirit takes the form of a dragon. The tornado forms as Blade unleashes the Dragon Eater, destroying the armor and damaging the wall. The strong winds dishevel Ernest's clothes and knock down the other students, leaving only Sophie standing. The practice sword crumbles under the power, unable to withstand it. Ernest asks Blade to reveal his identity, and when he turns around, he is shocked by the damage his attacks have caused. He tries to convince them that he is just an average person, but the class is skeptical. After the lesson, Blade joins Ernest for lunch. He attempts to invite his newfound acquaintances to join them, but they refuse, explaining that the table is reserved for Ernest. They are scared of her, and when Blade asks why, he receives no response. So, he sits down and marvels at the delicious food. Ernest apologizes for her earlier accusations, but Blade has already forgotten about the incident. He asks her not to let it bother her, as he has moved on. She acknowledges his talent and breaks the news that they are officially friends since they had lunch together. This makes her blush, and the other students notice her sudden affection for him. After a long day, Ernest relaxes in her dorm, giddy about making her first friend. Her sword starts to move, dampening her happiness. She recalls a flashback from her childhood when she touched the cursed demon sword, which turned her hair red and demanded destruction and chaos. In the present, she holds the sword, vowing to resist the dark force within and never succumb to its desires. The next day, the advanced class engages in mock battles, and Ernest displays an intense level of determination, defeating her opponents relentlessly. The other students notice her heightened intensity, but Sophie advises her to relax, which she disregards. After a brief exchange, Ernest admits defeat. When she turns to face Blade, she collapses due to the sword acting up again. Blade catches her and rushes her to the infirmary. The school nurse informs them that she can't do much as the problem is related to magic and curses, beyond her expertise. They pause their conversation when Ernest regains consciousness, horrified at the thought of losing control of her powers and causing harm. However, Blade assures her that she only passed out. Ernest attempts to leave the infirmary, but the nurse insists she stays until Blade promises to keep an eye on her. As they leave, she warns him never to speak of what he has learned. Blade reassures her that she can lean on him as friends. Later that night, Blade sneaks into a restricted area and causes the destruction of numerous robots. He knows he will face the king's scolding and enters a control room where he accesses the data of Rosewood Academy. He discovers information about Ernest's weapon, the demon sword named Asmodeus. He finds the sword unsettling. A robot attempts to ambush him, but Blade swiftly defeats it. With all the gathered information, Blade takes Ernest aside the following day to reveal what he has learned. They move to the training field, and he explains that the sword has its own will and grants immense power to its owner. However, Ernest hasn't gained full control over it. She opens up about accidentally touching the cursed demon sword when she was 6, and since then, she has been fighting against its desire for carnage. Blade assures her that she can gain full control and offers his support. Despite her fear of failure, Ernest embarks on the journey to make the sword submit under Blade's supervision. She enters an inner world where she confronts the demon and emerges victorious. Blade catches her as she informs him that she has succeeded. The following day at school, the students watch in awe as Ernest debuts her new hairstyle and transformed persona. Blade observes her with delight as she interacts with her fellow students. After rescuing Ernest from her demon sword, Blade begins a new day at Rosewood Academy. He meets his 2 classmates at the training grounds, where they attempt to attack Blade but fail to touch him. Ernest finds Blade's behavior rude as he doesn't draw his weapon during the mock battle. She advises him not to disrespect his opponents by looking away. Blade notices that Ernest has changed, and she is flattered when he mentions it. Curious, she asks Blade what specifically has changed about her. Blade imagines how Ernest looked before and after, but he struggles to pinpoint the changes, so he admits he has no idea. Even Leonard, another student, notices that Ernest has changed her hairstyle, but Blade's lack of observation saddens Ernest. She quickly moves on and assigns Blade to befriend another classmate named Sophie. Blade observes that Sophie often fights alone and wonders why. Ernest explains that Sophie has always been introverted since joining the academy. While she obediently follows orders, Ernest believes it's not the best quality as Sophie lacks her own will. However, Ernest thinks that if Blade befriends Sophie, she might open up more. Blade decides to talk to Sophie immediately while Ernest scolds Leonard for no reason, making him run 10 kilometers to prevent him from remaining weak. Blade approaches Sophie and tells her that Ernest requested he watch over her. Sophie asks if it was a command, and Blade clarifies that it was more of a request. He assures her that he wants to help her train, not just because of Ernest's request, but because he genuinely wants to assist. Sophie doesn't believe Blade can be of much help since she only knows how to fight with her fists. Blade asks if she can use any weapons, but Sophie reveals she can't. Intrigued, Blade takes it upon himself to teach Sophie different ways to fight and decides to start with the long sword. Sophie wonders if Blade's instruction is a command since she only follows commands. Blade clarifies that he wants to lend her a hand as a friend, not give her a command. Sophie agrees to become Blade's apprentice, as she has taken a liking to him. Before they can begin the training session, the bell rings, signaling the end of the practical training class for the day. Blade feels disappointed that he couldn't teach Sophie anything and turns to her, only to see her smiling for the first time. Determined, Blade plans to continue training Sophie the next day. On the following day, Blade helps Sophie learn how to channel her power into her sword. She attempts to cut an iron armor with the sword but fails to make a scratch. Blade realizes she needs to add more power to her attack and instructs Sophie to think of the sword as an extension of her body, channeling magical energy into it. To demonstrate, Blade channels his own magical energy into the sword and cuts the armor effortlessly. Sophie understands the concept, and, after a day of training, she learns to channel her energy and cut the armor with ease. With the training session ending successfully, Blade calls it a day. Sophie asks him if she can now defeat Ernest since she knows how to use a sword. Blade doesn't think it would be easy, as Ernest is on a different level. Sophie drops the sword and restrains Blade using her fists, proving that fighting barehanded suits her more than fighting with a sword. They sit in a mount position, and Blade feels a bit weird, prompting Sophie to release him. Before leaving, Sophie tells Blade that she wants him to teach her something else. The next day arrives, and Blade seeks advice from the headmaster, who is also the king. The king asks Blade if his school life is going well, and Blade responds positively, mentioning the friends he has made. The king is delighted to hear this, as he had always pitted Blade for lacking friends, despite being the world's greatest hero. Learning of Blade's interest in Sophie, the king tells him that although Sophie is strong, she is incomplete. He reveals the existence of the artificial Great Hero Project, in which scientists experimented with creating a being as strong as their greatest warrior. The king explains that Sophie is an incomplete test subject, the 12th iteration of the human Sophisha, created using ancient and forbidden knowledge. Blade is shocked by the cruelty of the experiments, but appreciates the king putting an end to them. The king further reveals that Sophie's real name is Sophisha Fento, indicating that she is an artificial hero with artificially granted powers. He explains that Sophie's goal was to surpass Blade's powers. Feeling responsible for Sophie's suffering, Blade decides to ensure she can lead a normal life. He visits his doctor to seek advice on what is considered normal for kids his age. However, he quickly leaves, realizing that the doctor misunderstood his intentions. Blade then turns to Leonard to ask him about youth, but Leonard gives a vague answer. Not giving up, Blade approaches Claire and Jessica, begging them to explain love to him. Claire tells him that love involves going on dates, walking around town, talking, and shopping. Blade moves on to Ernest's room, intending to learn about dates from her. Flustered, Ernest thinks Blade is asking her out and declines, explaining what couples usually do on a date. Blade leaves, without asking Ernest on a date, which surprises her. He then goes to ask Sophie out on a date, bursting into the locker room, and she gladly accepts. On their date, Blade and Sophie walk arm in arm, eat ice cream, visit a fishing spot, and go to a gaming station, causing some havoc. Meanwhile, Ernest, Claire, and Jessica keep an eye on Blade to prevent any funny business. As the day progresses, Ernest becomes jealous seeing Blade and Sophie together and indulges in eating ice cream to cope with her sadness. Blade and Sophie then visit a restaurant, drinking from the same coconut and engaging in touchy-feely interactions. Ernest wonders why Blade hasn't noticed the three girls watching them, oblivious to their presence. As they sit beside a fountain in the evening, Blade mentions that it is a legendary fountain, but Sophie fails to understand why. Blade admits he doesn't understand either, which makes Sophie smile, realizing their similarity in perspective. Sophie thanks Blade, expressing that she had a fun day. Blade explains that he thinks of her as a friend and wants to see her happy. Surprisingly, Sophie reveals that she doesn't consider Blade her friend since friends don't keep secrets from each other. Blade tries to make an excuse, but Sophie tells him not to worry as she confesses to keeping a secret from him too. Sophie unveils the truth about herself, that she is not an ordinary human but an incomplete test subject, created to be an artificial hero. She demonstrates her powers to Blade, manipulating the laws of physics, altering gravity, and even stopping time temporarily. Blade realizes how dangerous Sophie's powers are and blames himself for her suffering. In return, Blade reveals his own secret, that he was once the great hero, but lost his powers. Sophie accepts Blade's apology and explains that she takes pride in being created as his copy. They both acknowledge each other's secrets, leading to a deeper understanding. Blade resolves to ensure that Sophie can lead a normal life like everyone else. At Rosewood Academy, Blade quickly devours curry, leaving his friend astonished by his enormous appetite. Ernest reminds Blade to mind his manners as he has food on his face, but her concern isn't necessary as Blade's new girlfriend, Sophie, kindly wipes it off with a napkin. Witnessing the romantic connection between Blade and Sophie, Ernest feels jealous and intervenes to discourage their affectionate behavior. Meanwhile, Claire and her group approach Ernest, asking if they can join them for lunch. Ernest agrees, considering both Jessica and Claire her friends now after they all spied on Blade together. Jessica proudly shows off her new outfit and asks for Vlad and Claire's opinion. Claire feels a bit embarrassed, but it appears she doesn't need to worry since Blade has never been preoccupied with their fashion choices, and that remains true now. Ernest informs Blade that Claire and her friends have also been promoted to advanced classes, just like him. Chasson explains that the girls are now allowed to wear clothes of their choice due to the promotion, which is why they showcased their new attire. Jessica once again seeks Blade's opinion on her appearance, but he feels she looks quite chilly. Leonard takes it upon himself to be Jessica's savior, realizing that Blade doesn't recognize her flirting. He compliments both girls, comparing them to princesses, and introduces himself. However, the girls don't hold him in high regard. She proceeds to ignore Leonard, as she always does, and shifts the conversation to whether Blade has heard about the headmaster bringing a monster to the academy. The students become frightened, fearing that the monster will be used for their training. Ernest confirms their assumptions, but Blade remains unfazed, calmly finishing his meal. He shares that he's encountered thousands of monsters throughout his life, and this doesn't bother him. Ernest questions why he's so unbothered, and Blade explains that he knew the king, who is also the headmaster, would do something like this to challenge him. Nevertheless, he's confident in his ability to defeat any monster barehanded. Suddenly, the Rosewood Academy shakes, causing chaos in the cafeteria. However, Sophie realizes it's not an earthquake but the shockwave from the monster's movements that Ernest had mentioned. She suggests evacuating the building, and Blade agrees. But before he can leave to confront the monster, the dragon arrives in the cafeteria. It reveals itself as a yellow dragon. Despite Ernest's repeated warnings to back away, Blade remains composed and approaches the dragon with a smile. He notices the dragon is hungry, which is why it came to the cafeteria. Blade decides to calm the dragon down, skillfully jumping over it and knocking it unconscious with a single punch. Ernest cannot believe Blade just beat a dragon unarmed and wonders if she is just seeing things. Blade tells her that this monster is technically not a dragon yet, as it is just a child. After calming down the dragon, Blade asks the dragon if it was scared because it got dragged here, but the dragon looks at the food again, implying it's hungry. So Blade offers his meal to the dragon, and after eating the food, the dragon lets off an aura, as the food is quite spicy, while Blade laughs at the spectacle. Everyone else wonders how a person can be so overpowered, and Blade realizes that he is getting all the attention. So he tries to tell everyone that what they just witnessed is completely normal and claims that most of the magi can also be as strong as him. But the students don't believe him, as they have realized that Blade is abnormally strong. Seeing their concerned faces, Blade tries to tell them that the dragon he just beat is neither a great dragon nor an ancient dragon, but he doesn't understand that everyone is in Saitama like him and that they could just beat a dragon with one punch. The students even start backing off, thinking Blade is dangerous, and that makes him quite upset since his only goal in this academy was to make everyone his friend and not to show off his powers. Behind Blade, the yellow dragon undergoes a remarkable transformation, turning into a girl with blonde hair. Blade is taken aback to witness the dragon's disappearance and the sudden appearance of the girl. Even more surprising is when the girl jumps onto him, calling him her papa. She expresses her longing to meet her father and hugs him tightly. However, Blade is confused and insists that he cannot be her father. Despite this, the girl continues to refer to him as her papa, and Blade assures her that he will help her find her lost parents. Curious about the whereabouts of the dragon, Blade asks Ernest, but she tries to explain that the little girl before him is the dragon in human form. Blade finds it hard to believe something so unnatural. The persistent girl keeps calling him her papa, so Blade urges her to be quiet, concerned about his reputation in front of the entire academy. He then turns to Sophie for confirmation, and she assures him that the girl is indeed the dragon. Blade finally believes her and asks the girl if she truly is the dragon, but instead of answering, she jumps on him again, wanting to play. The girl affectionately refers to Blade as her papa and praises his earlier attack. She continues hugging him, asking him to spoil her. Later at night, When Blade is inside his dorm trying to take a bath, he also helps his daughter. He begins to wash off her horns, calling her by the name Ku, and she asks him why he is calling her Ku suddenly. Blade explains that Ku is the name of a knight who is strong and dutiful and who always keeps his promises. Ku turns around and tells him that she also keeps promises, as she believes that the oath of a dragon is more precious than life itself. Ernest comes into Blade's room without even knocking and gets embarrassed seeing him taking a bath with Ku. She tells Blade that all monsters, including dragons, are creatures who always pursue power. So, according to the information she found, Blade defeated the dragon, its body perished, but a part of its soul remained to retain information, and that part of the soul is Ku. But that doesn't explain why Ku is referring to Blade as her father. So, Ernest explains that the part of the soul gets reborn into another body, and then they will imitate the form of the being defeated them. Ernest believes that it's the dragon's instincts to see people who are stronger than them as their parents and a part of their evolution as they grow stronger. In other words, Ku has taken the form of a human after being beaten by Blade, who is also a human. Still, the chances of that happening are quite rare according to Ernest, as there aren't many humans who can defeat dragons in the first place. Blade understands that Ku is calling him her father as he was responsible for her rebirth. He accepts his destiny and introduces Ku to Ernest, who reveals herself to be taking a shower together with Blade, and that makes Ernest furious, realizing what a shameless degenerate Blade is. She kicks him in the face and immediately leaves his room as she no longer wants to see his face. Later, in the cafeteria, Ernest's anger flares up once more upon spotting Blade and Ku walking together. Ku asks Blade to treat her to some food, but he jokingly suggests she get it herself if she's so hungry. Nevertheless, considering her young age, Blade decides to feed her. Ku enthusiastically proclaims her love for being fed by her father, finding it far more delightful than eating alone. When Claire expresses a desire to feed Ku as well, Ku dismisses them, calling them mere humans unworthy of sharing a meal with her papa Blade. Blade advises Ku not to insult Claire anymore, but Ku insists that she should be the sole focus of his attention. She gives him detailed instructions on how he must take care of her every single day, and Blade agrees to fulfill all her demands. However, Blade's friends start calling him degenerate for taking advantage of a young girl. They unanimously believe he's guilty of wrongdoing and decide to punish him by ignoring him. Blade is confused and hurt, not understanding why his reputation is tarnished, and why his friends no longer want to be around him. He remains isolated, sulking in a corner. At the training grounds, the other students notice Blade looking eager to join their class, but Ernest believes he doesn't deserve to be with them anymore. She even threatens to punish anyone who supports Blade. Ku happens to come by the training grounds and sees Blade there. He invites her to join him, and she eagerly accepts the chance to spar with her father. However, their training session is interrupted by Claire's group, who are unsure of what to do on their first day in the advanced class. Blade provides them with proper instructions and inquiries about their specializations. Jessica mentions her expertise in espionage, and Blade suggests she train with Sophie as they would make a good team. As Blade continues advising the others, he notices that Ku has left the training grounds. Wondering where she went, Blade becomes concerned about her whereabouts. Meanwhile, Ku is aimlessly wandering around the academy and comes across a group of low-class students practicing their swordsmanship. They invite her to join them and even ask if she wants to be their friend. However, Ku hesitates, believing she wouldn't fit in as a dragon. Feeling unsure, she runs away and accidentally collides with Blade, who happens to be nearby. Blade then escorts Ku back to their room. Later, Blade expresses his sympathy for Ku, knowing that she has been alone since her birth. However, Ernest firmly reminds him that he can no longer play house with Ku, a fact that Blade is already aware of. Blade notices Ku gazing at the moon and stars and asks her if she desires to have friends. However, Ku insists she is better off alone, a sentiment with which Blade agrees. The following morning, Blade arranges for the king to become Ku's foster parent since he knows he can no longer play the role himself. The king agrees, but Ku runs away, longing to be by Blade's side. Concerned, Blade starts searching for her and finds her playing with dolls in his room. He realizes that Ku wants to be friends with his friends and yearns for everyone to be her friend, just like they are with Blade. This realization makes him feel sorry for her and blame himself for not noticing her feelings earlier. Blade understands that both he and Ku share similar goals, and he becomes determined to help her achieve them. He seeks Ernest's assistance, and she willingly agrees to help. The following day, Ernest visits the training grounds of the lower-class students and requests a favor from them, to fight Ku together so that they can eventually become her friends. The other advanced class students also kneel before the lower class students, agreeing to participate in the fight. The king officially arranges the battle, and Ku appears in her dragon form ready to fight. Blade advises her to fight fairly before the battle commences, and she becomes determined to showcase her strength, bringing this episode to a close. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment for more of this series. Thank you all for your support.